Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Well, today we do want to talk about the unenforceable law in Colorado. and I printed it out here because we're out here on top of the world, and I did want to have some good reference notes here. So I printed out the bill and highlighted some things I wanted to talk about. So I got lots of pieces of paper. When's the last time you saw a tech YouTuber use paper before? But, you know, may as well. So if you hadn't heard about this bill, and a lot of people have been talking about it, this is almost identical to the California bill, which has already been signed into law, which is equally unenforceable. And as I said at the time, right around the time that this was signed into law, the Texas bill was coming out. Now, the Texas bill was a little bit more insane in that it required every single developer to verify the age of the person, whereas the California bill requires the operating system to collect that information and then pass it over to the developer. Now, that was California Assembly Bill 1043, if you want to look that one up. And that's important because California, there's actually a thing in politics that California, whatever California does, several other states will do the exact same thing eventually in a fairly short order. It's actually a form of agreement that is had, and it's a little bit crazy and dystopian. But California Assembly Bill 1043 is effectively the same exact bill. This is Colorado Senate Bill 26-051. And the primary bill sponsors are Senator Ball and Representative Paschal. So if you are in Colorado, you need to reach out to those offices and every other legislator and make sure this does not get passed. It is stupid, it is unenforceable, and for the rest of us, we need you to do that because this is going to cost the state $248,400 according to the financial analyst of Christy McClellan. And $100,558 of that dollars is coming from federal tax dollars. How wonderful. So my taxes are going to pay for Colorado's devil's lettuce infused stupidity. All right, so let's go ahead and chat about the bill. The basic summary of the bill. It contains two elements to it. One is geared towards an operating system, which there is nothing in here which would say an operating system which comes pre-installed on a device. Okay, if that were the case, that would be fine because we can change the operating system on the device. But it requires any operating system provider to provide an accessible interface at account setup that requires the account holder to indicate birth date or age of the user of that device to provide a signal regarding to the user's age bracket, which is an age signal, to applications available in the covered application store. The provided application developer, so the developer must request that age signal from the operating system and has to use the technical ability to call an age signal via reasonable, consistent, real-time application programming interface that identifies at minimum the user's age bracket data, and 3, send only the minimum amount of information necessary to comply with the bill. An operating system shall not share an age signal with a third party for the purpose not required by the bill. Now, the first thing is that Texas required some form of verification. This bill and California's bill only required the person to enter it, which means that those two bills, the California and Colorado one, are a little bit better in that there is no real true actual validation of actually who it is. There's no third party mentioned here that you have to prove or attest that it is from updating some form of documentation, which means this is basically the same thing we've always had on the internet. Are you above 13? Yes, I am. Welcome to PH, you know. And so that really is the only good news about this is, as of right now, the bill only requires the account user, which basically means if you are an adult, you just say, yeah, I'm like 50, whatever. It doesn't matter as long as you're over 18, and everything in that system will be accessible to you. Then the what ends up happening though is that if you are a parent setting up a device for a child, you can indicate that age, which doesn't have to be a birth date, it just indicates the age. And with that particular age, now apparently a software application cannot even install because it must check that age first. Now, this is completely stupid for multiple reasons. Number one is applications get installed they tend to get installed on a full system basis with some means to do a user basis. So an administrator can always install an application. The user may or may not be able to install an application, and that application may or may not be installed system-wide. And so this misses those fundamental things because the people writing this bill are stupid and don't know anything about how computers work. All right, so a developer shall not, the bill goes further, they shall not request more information from an operating system provider or a covered application store than is necessary to comply with the bill, or share an age signal with a third party that is not required. So you can't collect anything other than the age, and you can't share that age with anybody else. And so we have a couple pages of definitions. Of course, those are fairly consistent. The basic user is the 18-year-old or the parent or guardian of a person under 18 who is not emancipated, etc. Now, these have the same age brackets as both the Texas bill and the California bill, which basically means, yes, behind the scenes, there's a bunch of guys that are all collaborating together, doing the exact same things, all creating the same dystopian framework that is the slippery slope to have everybody validated on the internet at all times. Those, of course, are under 13, 13 to 16, 16 to 18, and 18 and older. I thought there was one more in the California bill, but maybe there wasn't. All right, so an age signal is simply the age bracket data that is sent, and the application, of course, is any software that may be run or directed by a user on a device. So that's basically any type of programming. And this is what's interesting here is the definition of the covered application store, because they say, well, we don't have an app store. Well, think again. The app store means a publicly available internet website, software application, online service, or platform that distributes or facilitates the download of applications from third-party developers to the users of the device, which means every internet site on the internet right now must now verify check the age of the user prior to actually allowing you to install it, which, yes, is pretty stupid. Now, this does not apply to extensions, plugins, add-ons, or basically small pieces of code that are not specifically independent. So anything that's tied into a pre-existing software does not specifically apply. Obviously, a device is any general purpose computing device. So we're talking phones, we're talking computers, we're talking laptops, everything. The operating system provider means a person that develops, licenses, or controls the operating system on a device. Now, I do want to mention a small out Linux could have as Linux is not device specific. So if the language of the bill basically means the operating system designed for that particular device, well, Linux has an out because Linux is not device specific. And that is an important thing to keep in mind. So the requirements for the operating system providers and developers. So these are the requirements for the providers of the operating system, and operating system and developers. So part one covers the operating system provider. So the operating system provider has to provide an accessible interface at account setup that requires the account holder to indicate the birth date or the age of the user for the device. Providing an age signal will be available in a covered application store. So what this effectively is going to mean is that anytime you set up an account, you have to indicate the age of a user. I'm sorry, I ain't doing that. Okay, they have to provide the developer a means to request that signal, so a developer can request that information. So it also has to send only the minimum amount of information necessary. So this is interesting here. The developer, pardon the developer, they shall request an age signal with respect to a particular user from an operating system provider or a covered application store when the developer's application is downloaded and launched. So this means every developer on the internet has to have a means to check on the age of the user prior to either download or launch of the application. Okay? So developers shall not willfully disregard clear and convincing information that a user's age is different than the age bracketed indicated by the signal. So this is interesting because it implies that every application out there you download has to have some form of tracker to measure something. Or maybe they don't, and they say, well, I don't know, my application doesn't do anything. In which case they say, well, did you check the age? Well, if they didn't, well, they're going to be paying the fine. Now, except as provided in subsections 2B2 and 2C2, a developer shall treat the age signal received as pursuant as the primary indicator. Now, what that section says is if the developer has clear and convincing information that the age is different than the indicated age, then they can use that information as the indication instead of what was provided. So if your parent sets the computer up and says you're 16 and they somehow determine that you're 13, they can use the 13 that they somehow determine instead of the 16 that the parent set the computer up as. Which, okay, that's an interesting thing. Now, here is what I haven't seen anybody yet on the internet mention, is that there is no grandfather clause. In fact, to the contrary, there is an anti-grandfather clause. Okay, so it says here regarding existing devices in this law, with respect to device for which the account was set up or completed before January 1st, 2028, an operating system provider shall provide before July 1st, 2028, an accessible interface allows the account holder to indicate the age or the birth of the user, which means now if you have a pre-existing system and this law passes, then by July, an update to that system has to have been pushed to collect the age of the user. Very interesting. No grandfathering. Okay, an application last updated on or after January 1st, 2027 was downloaded to a device before January. The developer is not requesting a signal to the age of the application. The developer shall then request one. So now every software application in the history of the world must now be updated and ask for that age. This is ridiculously stupid. Now, enforcement and penalties. This is kind of pretty quickly. If you unintentionally violate this to a minor, it's a $2,500 fine, and it's $7,500 fine if you intentionally cause an intentional violation. All right. And so then there's some limitations. It does not require the collection of additional personal information. Operating system or provider application shall comply with it in a non-discriminatory manner, of course. There are some sectors that do not apply: internet basic telecommunication devices, delivery of a physical product, and also anything that's directly within a business to within a business. Also, it does not apply if somebody else is using it. So if the 13-year-old picks up the 18-year-old's computer and sees something he shouldn't see, I've seen something I shouldn't see, then the developer of the application that showed it to the 13-year-old cannot be held liable for that because the device was set up for an 18-year-old, which basically gives every single parent an out, because if they just set the device up at 18, then what's the case? So that really is the summary of the bill. This is stupid. It is unenforceable. Let's talk just briefly about Linux itself. Linux itself is completely cross-jurisdiction. The people who work on Linux systems are completely cross-jurisdiction. You can download it from anywhere. You can install it to anything. And there is effectively no means or way of saying that what you can do. So either Colorado and California and all these other states that want to do this are going to have to make Linux itself illegal, which good luck with that, because that's what controls the entire backbone, or they have to recognize that this law is completely toothless. Nevertheless, it is still going to cost all of us taxpayers in the United States $100,000 of federal money for that, and it's going to cost the $150,000 for those inside. So this bill does need shut down. We need a constitutional challenge to the one in California, which is the linchpin of like the framework for this one. That one's also pretty stupid. This is completely unenforceable. Now, I do want to end with this comment here. Of course, we talk a little bit of politics on this channel as it's needed, and people are going to leave politics out of it. You can't. Politics infests everything it touches. You have to talk about it. You have to talk about it one side, or you have to talk about the other. Now, I tend to lean right on most of your social issues. I tend to lean more left on some of the technology issues because sometimes the left does things better. The California version of this law is better than the Texas version. They're both ridiculously stupid. And I have to say that I don't agree with any of the politicians on this stuff. Have a system, have a physical piece of hardware I am allowed to control, then you keep your dirty paws off of it. And what if the children are hurt? Well, then the parents should have watched their children better. That's all I have to say. The parents should have watched their children better. And it's not hard to do. All right, there are many ways to do that. I guess the last thing I want to say, I want to save it for the very end, just in case. I know I'm going to irritate a bunch of people over here. Guys, this is what happens when you start legalizing marijuana. I mean, come on. You get harebrained stupid things. Get these politicians some brownies. They look hungry, guys. I don't know. Obviously, that's all kind of jesty, joking type stuff, but this is utterly nonsense. So let me know your thoughts about this. Of course, if you are in Colorado, you really need to push back against this. California needs overwritten, and we got some bad stuff going on in our world, and we really have to pay attention to those things. We really have to stand firm and take back control of our own personal devices. Let me know your thoughts about all that in the comments down below. Subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. Leave us a like and a comment down below.